as I said right before the break, it is hard to believe, but it's been 5 years since that deadly Metro North derailment in the Bronx that killed 4 people and injured dozens more. Now, survivors, they're sharing their horror stories, and the railroad's still dealing with lawsuits, plus a safety measure called positive train control that could have possibly prevented this tragedy. It is still not in place. Fox 1's Ray Ramundi, he has his special report.
At the sharp curve where it happened 5 years ago, you would never know such devastation ever took place. But at the time, this is what we all witnessed, a shocking scene of destruction and carnage. Metro North commuter passenger cars flipped over, mangled, and derailed off the tracks right before the Spuyten Duyvil Metro North station.
For passengers who were aboard this train, a lot of them are still living with the after effects from that accident.
Although 60 months and more than 1,825 days has gone by since that deadly derailment, the pain and fear for many aboard that train is still haunting. Journal News investigative reporter Tom Zambito speaking to one of those passengers. Steve Saccone was in the third car of that cold Sunday morning when he says his life changed forever.
This Stephen Saccone that existed before has died, and now he's sort of moving on with his life, finding a new path as a result of this.
Metro North train 8808's derailment on December 1st of 2013 killed 4 passengers and injured dozens of others as it was traveling 50 miles over the speed limit as it approached a sharp curve before the Spuyten Duyvil station. Steve Saccone, one of hundreds of passengers on the train and one of dozens filing legal action against the MTA.
There's a lot of very contentious issues, a lot of issues about who's really responsible for the accident, and a lot of very important questions that need to be asked of Metro North.
Saccone's 12-page civil complaint filed in 2014 lays out the suffering Saccone says he endured since the accident. Saccone says he suffered sustained severe and serious personal injuries, including multiple trauma to his head and body, and aggravation of a prior condition of cerebral palsy and multiple sclerosis. The complaint goes on to say his injuries were, quote, caused by negligence, carelessness, and or recklessness of Metro North, their agents and employees, in the ownership, operation, management, control, design, construction, maintenance, and repair of the Hudson Line track system. Metro North says they cannot comment on pending litigation when we reached out to them about the upcoming 5-year anniversary of that deadly derailment here at Spuyten Duyvil. What we can tell you is that that curve you see right here behind me and that crash has cost Metro North more than $60 million in settlements. Steve Saccone has been in a 4-year legal battle with Metro North. In fact, these investigative notes obtained by the Journal News shows how the agency paid investigators to keep surveillance on Saccone. In the minute-by-minute breakdown, almost a year after the crash happened, investigative notes revealed, quote, the claimant did not appear to always need his cane for assistance, as he used the cane on and off. The surveillance by the agency signifying Metro North's rigorous defense against pending litigation over the deadly derailment.
I think it's a matter of MTA is concerned of people exaggerating their injuries. They want to keep a watchful eye on not giving out compensation where it's not due.
Metro North is also facing a $10 million lawsuit filed by train engineer William Rockefeller, who claims the railroad should have installed a backup safety system to prevent the derailment. The civil case has not been presented to a jury. MTA lawyers are hoping to dismiss it before trial begins. 5 years later, and the saga of the crash is still fresh, with endless litigation in courtrooms. Metro North has focused on safety now more than ever, including monthly trainings, frequent safety assessments, and higher-level inspection and maintenance, which has expanded to transit agencies across the country. In Spuyten Duyvil, Ray Ramundi, FiOS 1 News.
The expanded reporting on this issue can be found on LoHUD.com right now, and it'll appear in the print edition of Sunday's paper. Now, investigative reporter Tom Zambito, he's been following this story for years, and he joins us now. Let's give a status update given where we are 5 years later. 4 dead, dozens injured. But as your piece really articulates, it's not just the numbers. A lot of lives have been irreparably changed as a consequence. And one person you profiled extensively was Steve Saccone,
Right. As you know, we've discussed in the past the money that's been paid out over the $60 million in settlements. It's a real financial hit to the railroad. But, you know, with this, we try to, you know, we talk to folks who are, experienced the human toll, you know, not just the families of those who died, but the people who are living with the injuries from the accident. And one is Stephen Ciccone, who was a very successful pastry chef and, you know, done cakes for Whitney Houston, Rosie O'Donnell, and the like. And you know, his life was pretty much upended. You know, he was struggling as it is with cerebral palsy, but he had managed to overcome those things. And then the derailment hits. So it's really been not just Stephen, but others are really struggling to get their lives back on track. As you can imagine, these are traumatic injuries.
In terms of 5 years later, the expectations of what, in terms of compensation, but also in terms of safety. First, $60 million's been paid out so far. There's still a lot of lawsuits that are pending. The MTA did not go quietly into the good night. They hired investigators to see whose claims were legit and whose weren't. Are folks surprised that still all these years later there's still so many unresolved and pending cases?
Yeah, you know, it was a surprise to us, but I think one of the issues is a lot of these folks have medical issues that their future health care is really to be determined. You know, they don't know if they're going to need surgeries in years to come, those sorts of things. So that's part of the equation here. Part of it is, you know, Metro-North fights back hard, as you saw in this piece. You know, they sent someone to surveil him when he taught a class out in Norfolk, Virginia. So, but that's pretty typical of what they do, and not to suggest that that's something nefarious of that. You know, there's a lot of money at stake, and they're trying to determine if the injuries were exaggerated.
And there was one surreal suit that's brought out, at least for me, was the train engineer at the time. And a lot of people directly pointed the finger that said, you know, there's some responsibility. There was erratic driving, both slow early on in that particular fateful ride, and then obviously going around that hairpin turn at an excessive speed. He's even filed a $10 million lawsuit. Not that a lot of people think there's a ton of merit to it, but nonetheless, he still filed it.
Right, and it's interesting, you know, his lawsuit has raised a lot of very interesting issues about what the railroad knew prior to this accident. You know, there was another accident in 2005, or at least a near derailment in 2005.
And as I learned from your reporting, a lot of warnings that there was a distinct possibility, if not inevitability, that there was going to be another accident. Because they didn't have both the right technology, and also other engineers had found that turn particularly troubling, right? Right,
and were it not for that lawsuit, these things may not have come out, because as you'll read, Metro-North has conceded liability in a lot of these cases. So there hasn't been a lot of certainly in-court debate over, you know, what they knew when. That's been brought up by Rockefeller's lawyers. So you have former Metro-North engineers coming forward and saying, hey, I told them years ago that we needed to fix this curve, that there needed to be a braking system, when there were some near misses there. So that's all come out as a result of his lawsuit, Rockefeller's lawsuit. So it'll be interesting to see if Judge Brissetti in the months to come allows it to go to trial, because that could really put Metro-North on the hot seat.
Now, you mentioned the safety aspect, and it was really through this accident and your reporting that a lot of us learned the term positrack, okay? In layman's terms, tell me if I got it right, that basically the train, regardless of the actions of the engineer, it will automatically slow itself at a certain point. 5 years later, I know some progress has been made, but we're still not completely there yet. Do I have it?
Yes. Yeah, the deadline is the end of the year, so we'll see in the next few weeks where exactly we are, Metro-North is on all that. They've asked for an extension. They are definitely getting to work doing the work. That's why there's been a lot more crowded trains, because they take the cabs off and fix them with this state-of-the-art technology. So it'll be interesting to see if they can make the deadline. But again, it wasn't just Spuyten Duyvil that, you know, was the indicated that, you know, something needed to change. There was an accident in California 10 years before. So that killed 26 people. So these accidents have occurred regularly, and there's, you know, definitely is a need for it now.
And we saw in the tragedy in Pennsylvania not long ago
California
as well, same kind of things in
Yep.
California as well. If you took away one thing from this that you were surprised, beyond the personal stories, is it that even with warnings and even with, people taking initiatives to go above, that for such a technologically based, engineering based function, that still we got to the point where we got to 5 years ago, and 5 years later we still are?
It's a slow-moving institution, and you have to understand that the mindset, or at least then the mindset, was on-time performance and let's get trains on time. They had, blown through previous passenger records, 86 million. So that was really the focus, creating more opportunities for people to travel out to Westchester County. Did they, lose sight of the safety end? Yes, they probably did, according to many of, the folks we've talked to. So you have to understand it's sort of the mindset changed, and it has changed now. It's more on the safety end.
And do you think, putting your citizen hat on, that the officials, that somebody's minding the store, or do we still leave it to these agencies to police themselves?
Well, yeah, it's a different group of people. It's not the same people who were there before. So yeah, I mean, if they haven't gotten the message from the $60 million or these personal stories, that's on them. But clearly, things have changed.
Tom, great reporting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, coming up next here, let's leave some of the heavy stuff and head over to Broadway. Kerry Washington, she's back in the Great White Way in a new play called American Son. John Simon, he joins us with his review after the break.